Hello, I'm Thal Smith, and this is another book review of Ray Bradbury's Martian Chronicles. Okay, the Martian Chronicles. uh, for the simple short of it, this book is brilliant. Absolutely genius, full of creativity, imagination, and pretty solid concepts of science fiction. Now, first and foremost, I will admit that the way Mars is in this book is very different from what it really is as we know it. Mars has no air in it, so we can't breathe. It's extremely hot. We could probably die from the heat. And they have these really crazy dust devils that can kill you pretty easily. Yeah. In other words, Mars is pretty much almost impossible to inhabit. Whereas this book basically makes out it is habitable. And that aliens were in the very beginning of this book. But to be fair, this was written in the 1950s. We didn't know as much we had about Mars, which led to more imagination what could be in Mars. Heck, this was before we even landed on the moon, man. Yeah. But you know what? It's still brilliant. Okay, think of it this way. Think of if in the 1950s they figured out space travel to go to Mars. And it was inhabitable. It barely had air, but it was inhabitable. It was habitable. True. And that's what the story does. This story gives you what could happen if the 50s, the 50s America went to Mars if it was a habitable planet. Which is kind of funny considering the dates are of 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, and 2026. I know. It's that far in the future. Nowhere near what the future is now, for the most part. Or, who knows, maybe in 2026 we will find out space travel. But I don't think we'd wipe out the Earth in an atomic war. Yeah, as I said. But, despite that, it's so brilliant. Like, take Usher 2. If you love Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, I strongly advise you read Usher 2. Because Usher 2 is, I think, the beginning concept of what Ray Bradbury would later write in Fahrenheit 451. There's a huge amount of similarity in the depth, the tone, the definition of it, what the story is. But at the same time, they're vastly different for the reason why they do it. In Fahrenheit 451's execution of the story to Usher 2. I don't want to get too specific into it, but definitely check it out. Heck, just check out this whole book. There's so many cool stories in here. Anyways, there's a lot of neat concepts. There's a story in here about the African Americans in the South leaving in spaceships from the South. Yeah, that's one of the stories they talk about in here. There's also another story about basically a guy who's human but decides to save Mars. He tries to stop the other men of his team from the rocket. Yeah. The point is, some of the themes in some of these stories are interesting. You have one about changing the original environment and how that's wrong. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They wrote something about that in the 1950s. And the moon be still as bright. And they mention about how humans would go to Mars and change what it was and rip off all the cool stuff that the Martians themselves had made. Yeah, I know. It was done in the 1950s. And then the other story mentioned, you know, just, oh, it's so good. This is such a good book. True. I mean, it is nowhere near what happened in late 1990s, early 2000s, but it's such a good book. So much good meaning and depth and imagination, creativity, and just everything about. I think what really makes this book so good, despite knowing, now that it couldn't be done nowhere near like this book, is the fact that there's such a good human condition in it. There's so much, you know, depth in the human ambiguity of us. The good, the bad, what we do right, what we do wrong as a people, as a race, is all delved into a book exploring Mars and how we would change Mars, and it's brilliant. There's so much depth in it that you just gotta read it on your own, you know? So, read it. Alright.